Hello, I'm Virginia Crowe, and today I'm delighted to be interviewing Melissa Speed, who's going to be talking to us about her short story, The Lacemaker's Son, which is featured in the Masterworks Anthology, which is an anthology of short stories by the Historical Writers Forum. So first of all, Melissa, tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you write, as well as this story, and what inspired you to start writing.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Wolverhampton, but I now live in the Peak District. And I'm an artist and a heritage volunteer. I also love writing. I started out writing poetry, and it took years for me to get the courage to put that poetry out there and to the World Wide Web for the world to see. But once I've taken that step, it became easier to find the courage to put other things out there. And so I started writing flash fictions, and then mostly was publishing those on Medium. And then last year I decided I wanted to start a blog about what it's like to be someone obsessed with history and wanting to visit all these historical sites and museums and whatnot, but with disabilities and mobility needs. And so I decided that I would write a blog about the places I was going to and how accessible they were for people like myself who need crutches and wheelchairs. That has changed slightly. I've been a bit inactive on it recently as I'm currently unable to get out as much. But what I have found, a sort of organic process, was as I was visiting these places, I started to find little bits about people with disabilities in the past and thinking, well, this is what it's like for me visiting now with my modern things. What was it like for those people back then? And so I've started researching more about the lives of people in the past with disabilities, and the blog will take that sort of turn in the future.
Wow, that is so worthwhile. That's a fantastic idea to do that. I've just got back from a little weekend trip away, and the thing that struck me as I was going around these ancient monuments is just how many steps they were expected to climb and how narrow they were. And I know people were smaller then, and so their feet were smaller than my massive feet. But even so, it must have been really scary if mobility was an issue.
Obviously when I was researching like my crutches, for example, for my reenactment outfit, I found that there's always been a way around things. People have always found ways to overcome the disabling barriers that they face. But certainly with the things that were available to people, now we can have an electric lift, although they present their own problems, trust me. But these things were there, and but in some ways I found that actually the disabled barriers that would have been in place then are very different to what they are now. And actually I could quite easily get up the steps with some assistance by scooting myself up on my bottom, pushing myself up and having someone to support me. But health and safety, no one wants you to do that now. So it's actually, although yes, we've got these new things available to us, it also has presented new barriers. So it's a really interesting process, and I'll definitely be writing a lot more about what I find as I sort of find it.
Fantastic. That, like I say, that is so worthwhile. And it will be really beneficial as well to people who are visiting these sites after you, to be able to find out just what is available accessibility wise. Yeah, that's brilliant. And poetry, wow. That's where you started. My goodness. I think poetry is so personal. That must have been really scary, sharing that as your first thing that you shared from your writing.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually read some of your poetry as well and love it, by the way. So I think you know exactly how daunting it can be, because something a lot more personal about poetry, even if it's completely made up and in no way, shape, or form connected to your own experiences, it's still your structure. You've still chosen those words. You've still got that rhythm, and there's something about poetry and art that really sort of, it's speaking from the soul and it's connecting to to other people in a different way. So I think, yeah, that's why it was so challenging to put it out there. There's that really good film with Robin Williams where he talks about why we read poetry. I can't remember it now, but yeah, if anyone's watching and they just Google Robin Williams talking about poetry, I'm sure they'll find it. And he really expresses that the way it's really what makes us human, you know. And I do love art and poetry, so that is where I began. But I've always had an active imagination. I remember at school, they always used to write about my imagination and my creative writing skills. But I think it can be hard to do things with them, because I think right from early on in life, a lot of people are generally told that you can't make a living out of it, you can't make money from it, and there's this priority put on, you know, well, you've got to earn money because you've got to pay your bills and you've got to put food in your bellies. That's all true, but also we need to feed that other part of us, and the thing that makes life worth living. And actually some people can make a living from it, but even if you can't make a living from it, you should still be encouraged to be expressing yourself creatively, so that you can still let that part of you out and connect with other people in these ways, and you know, enrich your life in that way, if that's what you like doing. But because you get sort of put off from such a young age, it then puts barriers up for you again with barriers, but there are, you know, new barriers in place. So it took a long time to overcome it, but poetry was what sort of set me free there. And yeah, I just love writing now. Things come to my mind all the time. I've got so many notes to myself all over the place, on my phone, around the house, everywhere, because I'll be reading something and, you know, something will suddenly pop into my mind and I'll think, oh, I could write a story about that, or oh, I'll write a poem. I wrote a poem after reading Giles Christian's book Lancelot, and one of the chapters just made a poem pop into my head, so I quickly wrote it with his permission, you know, and shared that, and it was quite popular, that poem. But it's funny how things just spring to your mind and you have to get them out, whether it's in a drawing or a poem or a story.
Yeah, and notebooks everywhere, so that when that happens, you just have it at hand and you can just jot it down, even if you don't get the complete thing. So Melissa, can you introduce us please to the artwork that you chose to base this story on, and tell us a little bit about it?
It's a painting called Lacemaker, and it's by Nicolas Maz, and it was created in the mid 17th century. I'm trying to think the exact year. I think it was like 1650s, and it's on display in the Met in New York. He was a Dutch artist, and I do think that those artists really sort of dominate that period. They are exceptional in the work that they create. Light in particular, you know, most people know this already, but it is something that is worth saying again and again. But they're also a great resource to anyone that's interested in history, whether you're a historian or just someone who likes to read about it, or you're writing and you need to do your research. The paintings and the artworks can tell us a lot. You know, there's another artist named Jacques Callot who did a lot of etchings and sketches, and I used one of his works for one of my own style portraits and for my crutches, and they were styled on something he'd done. So they're a great resource for us to find out, well, what was it like, what did it look like? I wanted historically accurate crutches, and thanks to the artwork I found it. And when I so my costume, by the way, is provided by English Heritage, where I volunteer, and when I came across this painting, the Lacemaker, the costume she's wearing in this painting is very similar to the costume I wear. So I was straight away able to connect with it and relate to it. I could feel the weight of it, the warmth of it, the texture of it, everything was there. So I was straight away already feeling like I knew part of this world. It helped as well that I started learning to make lace at the start of this year, in the traditional bobbin way. So there were all these things pulling me in. It was a period of history, you know, connected to where I volunteer. It was, you know, the costume very similar to my own, and she was making lace, and all these things. But then there's this little boy, and he's sat in this high chair, and the mum in it, she's making the lace, so her eyes are down, she's not looking at you. But the little boy, his eyes are fixed directly. He's gazing straight at you, you know, and it's interesting because he's not a young baby, you know, he's that sort of probably toddler age, but he's just commanding you and grabbing your attention. And babies can often get overlooked after the initial gushing phase of, oh, they're so adorable, oh, lovely. And then you carry on because they're not talking to you, they're not doing much, especially this one. He's sat in his high chair. The mum's making the lace, and it's called the Lacemaker. She's actually off to the side. He's more central, and he's there holding that gaze. And it got me thinking, like, he pulled me into his world, and it was a world I could really straight away familiarize myself with. I've been to these sort of houses, you know, I've worn his clothes, I know he smells, I've worked that lace, so I could hear the sounds, I could really get that world to come alive. But his world is what then started to interest me. You know, it's different for an adult, but I thought, what's he hearing? And when you're a baby, your mum or primary caregiver, they're your world, aren't they? As well as the sounds and the smells and the sights. You know, in his case, this is his mum, she's making lace, so that sound is right next to him, and her voice, they're the two main sounds that he's going to be hearing. And I really started to think about what happens when a world changes for somebody, and you know, also what are the key things that he's been exposed to in those early years, and what might happen if something changes for anyone. And I think that's probably something that's always in the back of my mind as a mum myself. And I developed stage 3 cancer when my son was only, I think he was 8 years old. And you straight away start to think, oh gosh, you know, what's going to happen if something happens to me with my child? And I'm sure a lot of people watching will be able to relate to this. And so it really got me thinking, you know, this is this boy and this is his world around him. And he's really speaking to me, writing this painting that Maz has done. And I just, from there, started to create this whole world for him and this whole life. And before I knew it, he was a middle-aged man and he'd got a whole life behind him.
Wow, that's amazing. It's great to hear that something like that, like a piece of art, can talk so directly to you. Yeah, it's a 1 in a million find, I think, when you're kind of wandering through a gallery and you go past all these amazing pictures, but then you just find that gaze, like you were saying about the child's gaze in that, and it just holds you. It's really something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a portrait artist myself, so I'm always drawn to people in the sea. So if I see a seascape, it's amazing how that can pull me in, and you can just be lost in that ocean. But with portraiture, if the artist has got something right, they don't have to be looking directly at you, but there might be something that makes you connect with them and identify something. And this was interesting for me with this particular painting, the Lacemaker, because you'd think that I would be connecting with the Lacemaker, you know, that she's wearing similar clothes to what I would be wearing. You know, she's the mom, she's the lace maker, but it was the child. And I think that's testimony to the power of Maz's work there, the way he's got this little baby to command your attention for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose as well, to a certain extent, you possibly, I mean, I could be totally wrong on this, but I suppose you were putting yourself into the position as his mom as you were looking at him. And so, you know, you knew what it was to be her, to wear those clothes and to be making the lace like that. So when you looked at him, you probably had all the feelings that she'd had when she looked at him all those years before, which is just an amazing thought.
Do you know, I think you're right. And actually this hadn't occurred to me at all, because I was thinking, oh, it's weird, I've not connected with her, I've connected with somebody. I think you've hit the nail on the head. And this is where I know, really loving this chat we're having, because actually I think I've probably processed a lot of thoughts and feelings that, you know, I've had as a mother and stuff, and I actually now can see some influences from my own life going into the story that I wasn't even aware were there. So that's really interesting for me.
Fantastic. Yeah. People and their relationships are definitely central to that story. How much research did you do into keeping that family accurate? And was there a particular gem that you discovered while you were researching that you'd like to share with us?
So the family's entirely fictional. So I had a little bit of free reign, but one thing that did occur, I don't want to give spoilers away, but the family itself did change a little from what I originally intended when I was researching about health issues. So I think one thing that it's not a spoiler to say really, because it happens right at the start of the story, is that the mom dies, which I guess you kind of predict there with what we just discovered about my own fears being processed without me realizing it. But yeah, so I was doing some research. Obviously, I'm quite familiar with that period of history, so I knew a lot of the illnesses and things that happened. But when I was trying to check for some other things, I came across some really interesting things about causes of death and illnesses that were happening to people at that time, and it really gave me a new element for the family, a new dynamic, and it changed things. It changed the family structure in ways that I hadn't expected at all. But it added a new interesting element, and so I think anyone that's interested in that period of history, a good thing to do, you can just search on the internet, but obviously there are lots of books out there as well, and find things for like causes of death, parish registers, anything like that are useful. And there's a book called Culpeper's Herbal, which has got lots of remedies for lots of different ailments, and it's interesting to see what was out there and what was being used. So there are lots of gems to find, and they can change your story in surprising ways. But before that, I already sort of had an idea of the family structure, and I knew which events I wanted to be happening. So although the family is entirely fictional, the world they're in is real. And so I thought, well, I want this to coincide with this event. And so what I did was I had a timeline, and the things at the bottom of the timeline were the real events. So this is mostly set in the middle part of the 17th century, so around the Civil War period and just after. And I would put things like Cromwell's death and certain battles and things like this in the bottom half, and then the top half, the things that were happening to the family. So I knew what was happening with them, and that helped me make sure that their ages were accurate and things like that. Obviously, there's room for a little bit of movement because people remember things slightly differently anyway. So I allowed for it to still be human, but still have this backdrop of these events that were real.
It did really take you back to what it would have been like. There were some amazing lines in there that just sort of enveloped you in that 17th century setting. It was really, really
well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. It's something it's a period of history I found myself in accidentally, again through being a mother. So originally, and still, a huge passion for me is the latter part of the sort of medieval period, especially the Plantagenet era, but some bits before as well. And it was actually through my son who got really into the Stuart period and Charles II in particular, thanks to Horrible Histories. And we took him to some sites that were connected with Charles II. And that's when I found that Boscobel House were looking for volunteers. And that's what started my volunteering journey. And through volunteering for them and getting more interested in things, and you think, oh, that's interesting, I'll go and find out about that. I became sort of immersed in this period, and just through natural progression and curiosity, and you come across things from visitors, from other volunteers, from staff, but going to different sites, and you spot things and you think, oh, that's connected to the story that I'm working with. And so you start to pick things up, and it's a world that for the last 5 years really I've found myself more and more immersed in. I actually prefer the reenactment crutches. I prefer the clothes. If I owned the clothes myself, I would just live in them. They're far more comfortable than modern things. And actually I used to live in Staffordshire, near Stafford itself, and there's a place there, the Ancient Dye House, and I went in there and found that had got a connection to the Charles story, in that Charles I had been there with Prince Rupert. And I became sort of a bit obsessed for a while with finding out as much as I could about Prince Rupert and his time in this region and what happened to him, and I really sort of just fell in love with it all. And so I think when you've exposed yourself to so much, you've been to all these different places that still look and smell much as they did, yes, things have changed, but there's still a lot of it that's the same. And then you start wearing the clothes and doing all these other things. And we would do like recipes, together that were from those times. It really helps you to imagine that world in your head. So I'm so glad and relieved that you felt that you could be taken back there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's fantastic, the story. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I did feel that well, this kind of leads on to the next question. So I did find that you portrayed the main character very, very well as this conflicted character, because you know, half the time you wanted to like give him a hug, and half the time you wanted to just scream at him because you know, oh. But yeah, that's a win in terms of character development. That's fantastic. So he is obviously a very conflicted character. And he does come completely to life. What or who was your inspiration for him?
Genuinely, the inspiration was that little boy in the Mez painting, and it was just by finding myself transported into that world that Mez created that he emerged, and then all his other influences coming in. I suppose at times I've probably also taken little bits from you know, observations in the real world, same with all the characters in the family and how they all interact and things. You know, not just your own family, but you witness things even just out having a coffee. You know, you'll see how people, you know, some people will shut down questions that their children are asking, you know, quite quickly, and others will really explore it, and before you know it, they've gone on this massive sort of exploration into loads of things. So it's interesting to see how people handle things differently, and there's so many different types of person in the world, and sometimes someone might have something going on with them that no one knows about or that we don't understand fully, and people can treat each other differently. And so I think what I did was I just thought about all the people, you know, that I've had experiences of, and tried to get realistic portrayals of people, but not based, none of the characters in it are based on anyone I know. I wouldn't be able to say to you, this character reminds me of this person. Even people I don't know that perhaps I did see in a coffee shop. It's little fragments of everything, and really the boy came from the world that Maz had created in that artwork. But yeah, it's a powerful piece of art, to be honest. And I think as an artist as well, when I'm doing my portraiture, when I've created a work, I see that person in the artwork. I'm going to sound crazy now. I see that person as going off and having a life of their own. There's these wonderful picture books for little children. The character's named Katie, and she goes to art galleries with her grandma, and she finds herself going into the paintings and conversing with the people in there. But I can do that when I'm at a gallery. I see an artwork, and you know, that person in there has a whole life that I create for them, which is probably completely different to the life the person actually had in reality. And you know, it's the same with when I'm doing a portrait. It may be completely different to how the sitter sees themselves or how other people see themselves. But as long as it can speak to the viewer, and every viewer, that person can be a different person for every viewer. So I think I'm just the sort of person that creates lives for people all the time, whether they're someone I've drawn or something I've seen that someone else has painted. You know, it's just there happening. So it was really easy for me to make this boy a real man and give him a whole life right through, because it's just the way my head works.
Oh well, it worked very well. So that's good. Well done.
Thank you.
As you mentioned earlier, this is based on the 17th century Civil War and the impact that it had and continues to have for the Staffordshire family. Which side of the war, if either, would you have been on if you'd been around then, and why?
Well, I mean, this is a big thing in our house, actually. So my son became obsessed with it for a while and asked everybody. So, for example, if you came to my house before you'd even sat down and been offered a coffee, my son would have asked you, which side of the Civil War would you have been on? Are you a Roundhead or a Cavalier? You know, when you would have demanded an answer straight away. You know, how children are, they don't think of these wider things, and it would sometimes cause quite heated discussions with family members when they'd never had this conversation before, and they suddenly find that they would have been on different sides. But actually, that's what I love, because that's the reality of the Civil War, and you did get brother fighting brother, or father or neighbor against neighbor, and households could be divided by it, and it's something that I try to get visitors to connect with when they come to Boscobel. We've got Charles is depicted in 3 different places in the parlour, and I will get them to see if they can find all 3 pictures, and then I do this big celebration, like, oh, you found him, which is more than the soldiers could do. So now what would you do? Would you hand him in and get lots of money, or would you help him hide? And then the family groups will come out with different answers, and it helps them understand the reality of what it was like for families in the war, in that you might be on different sides. And so I love to do that, and everyone who knows me knows that I get quite passionate about which side I'd be on in these historic things. So with the Wars of the Roses, I'm like, well, I'd have been a Yorkist for the Duke of York, had the strong acclaim, and with this, it's a Cavalier. That's who I would be, and guess which side my husband would be.
I'm guessing that he would be a Roundhead.
Yeah, my son's a Cavalier, so it's a really good one. It just shows you how even now people can be so passionate about something that was so long ago. So what must it have been like for the people in it? And even like Boscobel is another volunteer, and we love to have a joke about it, because he would be Roundhead, but his costume's quite Cavalier, and so we have a good laugh about that. So everyone picks sides, but yeah, I'm quite passionate about, I'm a rule follower, and I'm quite boring in that sense. So I would have been, well, but this is the king, and what he's saying is going, so that's what we're doing. I wouldn't have been brave enough to rebel. That's not something I would have been able to do at all. But yeah, I just and also obviously on a more serious note, we know from history that once Cromwell sort of began ruling, he became king in all but name, really, and he really did oppress the people, and so there was lots of good things about him, and lots of good things about what they were doing and trying to do, but also there were things that people were very unhappy with, and it wasn't a great time for a lot of people, and so after years of his rule, when Charles II came back, when we restored the monarchy, it must have been so liberating for those people, because they were able to do things that they hadn't been able to do for a long time. So although there was a lot wrong with the monarchy and with the way Charles I was doing things, and you can see why the Civil War came about, you can also see why they wanted to change it again. And we have to try and view things not with our modern eyes sometimes, and think, things that were very important to people then might not be to us now, but they would have been then, just like things that matter so much to us now, and we get divided, so I think there's a lot to learn from history, and it's fun to have these sides and be passionate about them like I am, but also my friends always know that whilst yes, I get passionate about it because I love history, it is just sort of a bit of fun as well, and I certainly won't be taking up arms against my husband, although we do often have a little dig at him for his choice of being a Roundhead.
Would you say that you've always been a Cavalier at heart, or is this something that has changed? Because I know my mom always said she was a Roundhead until fairly recently, and then she was like, actually, having explored a bit more, I think I would probably lean towards being a Cavalier.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think I hadn't really thought about it much until I started volunteering at Boscobel 5 or 6 years ago. But when I think back, I spent a lot of time with my maternal grandmother. My nan was wonderful, and she was a royalist. She loved the monarchy, and I think when you spend a lot of time with someone and you admire them so much and love them so much, those influences filter through to you. So I think it's probably her influence there that made me lean instinctively towards the side of the monarchy. And I still love anything to do with the royal family now, but again, like my husband's very, very different in that sense. So it does make for an interesting household at times. But I think I've probably always been that way at heart. But my mum, she wouldn't have been Cavalier. She would be Roundhead. She'd be off with my husband on that side. Our family really does get split with it, actually. So it's quite a fun one. How about yourself? Do you have a side?
I think I would be a Cavalier, I think.
Yay.
Yeah. I love spaniels, so you know.
Well, there you go. What's not to love? I think that's an interesting point, actually. It's those other things, you know, we can think about like the politics and the reality of living in that world, but also what often influences now is like things that we can see and relate to straight away and what appeals to us. We're very visual people, you know, or like sensory people, you know, not necessarily what you see, but hear and smell as well. And I think that they do look like the ones that you want to go and hang out with in that sense. You know, they're having the fun, you know, they're very stylish. It's like they really appeal. And I'll to add to me sounding crazy again, like I did earlier, the Prince Rupert, I developed a bit of a historical crush on him after visiting the ancient Eye House in Stafford and then going and researching him. You know, I just thought that he was so cool and he looked so amazing. So I think that those things do help. I mean, no one is going to look at the Roundheads and think, you know, like, oh yeah, that looks cool, that looks fun. I mean, maybe people do. I don't know. I'm saying that. You know, what do I know? Some people probably will. But for me personally, I looked at the Cavaliers and I just thought they looked, you know, they've got that long hair, and you know, I love the sort of late 60s, early 70s, you know, like guys with long hair, all that sort of thing. So there's definitely a lot there speaking to me.
I totally understand. So moving on from the actual like content of the storyline of the plot onto the writing itself, you wrote the whole story in first person. Wow, first of all, I cannot do that. What are the biggest pros and cons, would you say, of using that voice?
Yeah, so I think I when I'm writing generally, I sometimes write in first person, but probably like yourself, more often would choose third person. But with this, because of the way Maz had got this boy directly engaging with the viewer, it had to be first person. But also, I knew that I knew almost instantly that I was going to have it, that his world changes in some way, and obviously a big part of his world was the mum. So having the mum die, so I knew that he would be going through a lot internally, because we all do. I don't think people have changed that much. And so when he's, you know, he's got to process what's happening and he's got to work through this, that's all stuff that's going to go on inside. Yes, we speak to some people about things, or some people do bottle things up forever, but a lot of it is going on in there, inside, that we can't connect with. And when you're writing first person, it does have a lot of challenges because everything needs to take place around them. So every conversation they need to be either part of or privy to. Every action, it needs to be something that they can see. It's all got to be from them, and from their point of view. And you've got to think about how he's going to be reacting and responding to him. So it's definitely got those problems because you're very limited. But on the other hand, it's giving the reader a connection that we can't get very easily. We can get it through diaries, and we can get it through first person fiction narratives, where it's really what's going on, what is inside that we don't share with anyone, with the rest of the world, don't share with people. And there's a lot, if you think about it, how many thoughts you have in a day that you never vocalize, you know, you say them, you know, but they might still play in your mind. You might go to bed and it might pop back in there and no one will ever know about it other than you. But with first person narrative, the reader gets to be part of that. Now, if I'd have written the story in third person instead, you know, then yes, they would get to see some other things. Perhaps I could have had other people in the story having things, and the main character doesn't need to be anywhere near it. And I could have perhaps done more with those characters. But then the reader, you're viewing the world through this omnipotent narrator as an outsider. You're never really immersed in it in the same way that you are with a first person, in that you are immersed in their world, not the whole world around, but their world and that internal world. And there's a lot that goes on inside, and it's a key thing really for me. And so it had to be first person because that boy in that painting, he is drawing you in. He wants you to connect with him, and he can't speak. He's not a baby that's speaking, but he's having those thoughts, his experience, and these things, and he will in the rest of his life have it. And so right from seeing that painting, I knew it got to be first person, and I knew that there was going to be a lot that he would be keeping inside his mind. And so I wanted the reader to be able to have that special connection with that baby that Maz started way back in the 17th century, and I've just sort of developed it from there. So it's definitely got its pitfalls, but I think it's definitely got that advantage where the reader gets to be part of something they just never otherwise would. Other than, as I say, with diaries, we get to see those thoughts that people wouldn't have said out loud.
Do you have a favourite line from The Lacemaker's Son, of which you're especially proud, or are you just proud of all of it, which is absolutely fine, by the way?
Yeah, I do actually. Now, normally I'm sort of someone who criticizes my own work, art, writing, whatever, all the time. I have real sort of issues there. But actually, there were a couple of lines in this that I did actually think that's good. It's the amount of artworks that have ended up in the bin and stuff. It's terrible. I really am very critical and negative of myself. But one of the lines I liked it for the imagery. I thought that I suppose it felt almost poetic, as well as helping the reader be immersed in that world. But the line that really for me is most favourite might not seem that powerful at first. I'll read it to you. It was as though something was consuming her from within, eating the very flesh from her bones, yet leaving her skin intact to hide its doings. Now, that on its own might not seem that great, but the reason I like it and I'm happy with it, which, let me tell you, is a miracle, is that it's something that I think a lot of people can relate to. We've all seen people ill or dying. It's part of life, and we've seen the way someone can outwardly seem fine, but then inside there's something going on, and we can't see what's happening in there. And it can be frustrating, and we can get scared or curious or all sorts, and it can really have an impact on us. And so I like it for that reason, but also the idea of the skin hiding what's going on underneath, this outer shell that we have hiding what's inside. And I think one of the themes of the story is, as I mentioned earlier, what we keep to ourselves, what's going on in the mind that we're not sharing with the world. And as you said, the readers get to share that with Henry through this first person narrative. But I think that this line, it sets up this theme for the book. So the reader gets this sort of hint that they're actually going to get to find out a little bit more about what's going on, what's being hidden outside that we don't know about. And so I liked it for that reason. It's quite a simple sentence structure, and there's nothing overly sort of flowery about it, but I think it's quite raw and real. It's something a lot of us can relate to, and it will hopefully get them thinking about, oh yeah, actually, what do we keep inside?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those lines where you read it, and almost without knowing, you're thinking, oh, that sounds like so and so, or that could be this person, or something like that. And yes, straight away you've got that connection. But you are allowed to feel proud of your work. Don't do yourself down. It's a real I know, but you've produced something here which is a fantastic story. You should be proud of every word of it, even though you pick your sentence that you love, obviously.
I do put my heart and soul into all my works, but I then just sort of I don't know, maybe that's part of it is that sort of fear comes through it, but also I'm so critical of myself. I'm always wanting to do better and finding fault with everything. And I think it's just my nature. But yeah, I'll add you to the list of people that's had to suffer me being a bit negative.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being a perfectionist, but you do have to acknowledge when you get to the point of being perfect, like with sentence structure, like you were saying, or lines that just sink in. and just grab the reader completely. So being a perfectionist, great, but know that you are eventually going to reach that point where you've accomplished something that is so close to perfect it counts. What do you hope? Because we've talked about Henry a lot, and just how much you do get into his mind. What do you hope that your readers would take away from this story? Obviously, try and avoid spoilers, because I realise that there's probably a few things that will contain spoilers there. But being as cryptic as possible, what do you hope to leave your readers with?
I think two things. I think one, obviously, I'm hoping that some readers will want to know more about the period. It's a fascinating period of history. It really is. This sort of English Civil War time, and it's set, as you said, like in the sort of Staffordshire area, and a lot went on there. And I've deliberately kept the real life stuff quite vague. As you know, as it should be. We all remember things differently and sometimes get bits wrong and stuff, and so nothing should be too perfect and set in stone, because that just wouldn't be a reflection. If we were to talk about an event from 20 years ago, we'd probably be like, was it 19 years, 18 years? And we'd have to try and work it out and stuff. So I deliberately wanted to keep it vague, not just for that reason, but also for the reader to be intrigued. I wanted to have a certain amount of like, oh well, what was going on and why were they there and what was happening? But there's enough historical fact going on to make things possible. It's like, well, okay, we know that these people were in this region at this time, so it's perfectly reasonable to think that maybe a lot else went on that didn't get recorded for history, so for us to know about. And so I can give that to my characters, and it's perfectly plausible, but it's vague. It really is a backdrop. The time and the historic events are a backdrop to Henry's story. So I'm hoping that they'll think, oh, I want to know more about that. I wonder what a kirtle feels like. I wonder what it's like to wear one. Or, oh, I wonder how he made bobbin lace. Or just, oh, what was the Cavalier up to, in Staffordshire at that time. So I'm hoping they'll want to go out places, try new things, or at the very least just read something else from the period, because it really is worth it. The other thing that is key, and I think this might be where you're saying avoid spoilers, so I'm going to do my best to avoid spoilers here. But I think that the world is, and always has been, full of different people. We are all different and all unique, and as time's gone on, science has developed, and various other developments have occurred, we become more aware of things, and more things get diagnosed, and more things get accepted, and in some ways people haven't changed as much as we might think. When there's this 1800-year-old birthday invitation that a dad sends out for his daughter's birthday party, it could be done today. That's still what we do. We haven't changed that much. On the other hand, yes, we've changed in that we're no longer burning witches at the stake. So fundamentally those human behaviors and reactions to each other and family units, certainly, there's still, as there always have been, lots of different types. There's no one set thing, and you'll see that in this. You'll see that the way people work and communicate with each other in families, and also the things that people might be going through now and would have been going through then. There's lots of illnesses that just because we now know about them and we've given them a name doesn't mean they didn't used to exist. One of my main conditions that gives me mobility issues, I'm convinced that a guy in the past had it. He's got all the symptoms, but it wasn't named back then. So I'm hoping that they'll think about, well, what might be happening. What did kill the mom? What's going on with all his characters? What might explain things? Maybe they don't want to explain it. Maybe they want to just accept the people for who they are and love or not love them for who they are. But also maybe think about what has stayed the same and what's different, and how do we treat people now, and is that different to how we would have treated them then? Has naming something helped us change the way we treat these people? It's and this isn't it's related, but it's not connected to my story, so it's not a spoiler. But there's a guy, John Lancaster, has done this amazing book, not Not All Heroes Wear Capes, I think it's called. And he has a visual difference. His face looks different, and he talks a lot about how the kids at school treated him. And so it's interesting to think about, you know, how like these things that happen to people's bodies, they're not new, they've always been happening. How might it have been different in the 17th century or the 12th century or way back, you know, in ancient Greek times? You know, it's like how much has changed, how much has stayed the same. And I'd love for people to think about that and think about themselves in that sense, really, you know, and how they might treat others, and how do they feel about these characters? What are their reactions to them? What do they think's going on with them?
It's almost like a support in that respect, isn't it? The story, it reaches its end. I don't want to give away anything either, so I'm being as careful as possible. And you realize that, you know, the most important thing is that people are people, and that's the essence of it all. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but more than that too, but I'm not saying anymore. Okay, big question now. But fun question, but big question. If time travel were possible, and, you know, one day, never say never, would you choose to go back to that 17th century? So I put 1688 down here, but, you know, into the Civil War time as well. Or would you choose a different time, and why?
Yeah, I mean, that sort of Civil War to, as I say, 1688, you know, that whole time where James II gets sort of shifted out, and, you know, lots changing. It's a really interesting period of history. But actually, it's not one of the things that would first jump to mind. Maybe because I already exposed myself so much to it. I don't know. But it's a conversation I often have with a group of friends of mine. We're all into history, and it often comes up, you know, I'd kill for a TARDIS. I'm just waiting for the doctor to come and take me somewhere. And you know, quite often I'll say, oh, I'd go back to the time of Henry II because I'd love to have been a fly on the wall. You know, what did he say to those knights? You know, or, oh, I'd love to go back and witness Matilda in the Anarchy escaping in the snow with a white cape, just because that would have looked so cool. You know, and there's all these cool things. But and I do, you know, the Wars of the Roses is my favourite period of history, but I don't think I'd want to be there for even a day because I doubt I'd survive. So I wouldn't be asking the doctor to take me there. But my honest answer, all these cool things that are fascinated and that I spend so much time reading and researching and visiting the properties. But truthfully, if time travel existed, I'd be going back to 1973. Because the music was fantastic, and I'd try and get as many concerts as I could. I'd be looking for Fleetwood Mac, Leonard Skinner, the Eagles. You know, I'd be off just really enjoying myself and loving all these guys with their long hair making amazing music.
Okay, I can honestly say that was not the answer I was expecting, but brilliant.
I love music, and I love that period, and that year was so good for music, you know. You know, my mum and my nan, I've mentioned, you know, they're huge influences on me and my character building, but everyone knows that my music has come from my dad. And if you were to say what's the one thing he's instilled in me, it would have to be that, you know. And we love music, we go to concerts together, not so much these days, but, you know, in the past. And we still have record nights now, but I just love that period. It's amazing. The fashion was amazing, the music was amazing, and I wish I were born. I was going to say 10 years earlier, but if we say 20 years earlier, so I could have enjoyed it a bit more.
Oh, fantastic! It sounds like you're from a very arty family, like all the arts, the visual arts, writing, music. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I suppose creatives can sometimes be drawn to each other. My brother does pyrography art as well, and my husband works in the music industry. So, and my son's very creative. I mean, he blows my mind. His imagination and raw talent is far greater than anything I could ever hope of achieving. He blows my mind every day.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm sure that, you know, in a few years' time, when he's asked about inspirations, he will be coming back and saying, well, my mom, you know, all the support, all the inspiration and everything like that. So, yeah, it's a credit to you that you're able to pass that on. It's really good.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a nice way of looking at it.
So what's next with your writing or your visual art as well?
Yeah, quite a lot. It's been a busy year actually. I remember when we first started doing this, and I sort of did some of the writing for the story, and then like so many other things were going on, and I was like, oh, next thing I knew, it's like, oh my gosh, I really need to edit and stuff, and then you just before you know it, we're here doing this interview, and I feel like it was just yesterday that I was sort of making my story proposal to you. It's great that it's been busy. I've as I say, I am an artist. I've got at the moment I'm doing a set of portraits for one particular sitter, and I'll release those as a set. And then I'll also be doing a charity one where I'm going to be doing a portrait of a guy who is homeless, and I'll be raising money for shelter through that. And I'll share all that on my art social media stuff and my art website. I'm also going to be on for telly in November. Who knows how I'll come across. I mean, you know, you just don't know what they're going to use or show. Hopefully they'll edit it kindly. But I'll be taking part in Sky Art's Portrait Artist of the Year. And interestingly, there is a connection because the portrait I submitted was me in my basketball costume. And I've had so many sort of photos taken over the years from visitors and family and photographers, everything. So I am used to sort of doing lots of different poses, and so I had a friend take a picture of me mimicking the Jacques Callot one I'd used to get the crutch reference, and I used that photo, and I'll show you the picture. This is the work that got me on Portrait Artist of the Year. I don't know how well you can see it. And so you can see the connection hopefully to the Maz work as well, with the not in terms of the artistic quality, but in terms of the costume. You can see why I sort of made that connection. But yeah, I do have that sort of, it comes through even then, my history, my love of history, my love of that period, but I'm more myself in that than I am like this, I feel truer to myself in that costume. So I knew that if I were to do a self-portrait, I'd want to do my truest self. And again, that comes back to that theme of what do we hide and not show. And I suppose for me, what I'm saying to the world there is actually I am in pain all the time, and actually I'd much rather be dressed like this. And I'd much rather, I'm not comfortable with the modern world, and I never think about the future. I only ever look back behind me. If I did get that TARDIS, I'd never go forward, always back. So yeah, there's a lot there with the art stuff, and then also with the writing, I think I mentioned I'm always getting ideas, so I've got lots around, but the two I'm prioritizing are going to be short stories. One is inspired by something that Charles II said to Samuel Pepys, and I just thought it would be a great title for a story or a book. But I think there's only enough material that I've come up with for a short story. And also I said that we're sensory beings, aren't we? And the feel of the crutches, and the way they feel against you, the way they feel against your hands, the way they are with the body, it's very different to modern crutches. I do actually prefer them, other than it causes problem here. I've got no lymph nodes at all, so I get a lot of swelling if I'm on them for a long time. But I've always do love my crutches, and I love the feel of them, and they sound different, they smell different, everything about them is different. And through the crutches and me really at one point having some sort of weird mindful experience where I really just sort of became one with my crutches, this character emerged in my head, that sort of, I suppose it could be that character there, because I told you she's no longer me, she's some different person that's got her own world in that portrait. She's just calling you in to go and explore it. So I'll do it with this short story. And obviously I'm still the research for the disabilities in the past, that's an ongoing thing as well.
So do you foresee that with everything you're gathering for your blog, do you think you'll put it together as a pamphlet or a book for possibly for English heritage and places like that?
Yeah, the hope is definitely a book eventually. Little tidbits that I find that particularly interesting or connected to a site that I visit will definitely go on the Access and History blog, which, as I said, at the moment I can't drive because I'm living with a brain tumour, so I'm waiting for for DVLA to decide if I'm safe to drive. And so hopefully, because my consultant would be happy for me to, but obviously the DVLA have their own things going on, which we have to respect. So hopefully I'll be back on the road soon. But that's why the blog has sort of come to a standstill at the moment. But I'm keen, and I'm still getting out sometimes. And I've got a lot of stuff already from research. So that's definitely the direction it'll be taking, because it won't matter whether I'm driving or not, because if I can't get to as many sites, I can still be doing the research. But when there is a connection to a site, it'll go on the blog. But then everything else, it will, I'll put it together into a manuscript and hopefully find a publisher. And if not, then, maybe self-publish. But I think that hopefully it will be of interest to a lot of people. I love people. I find people fascinating. I'm definitely a people person. I've always loved working with them. It's one of the things I love about volunteering. I volunteer for another heritage property as well, where I'm actually a access panel chair. So you can see the disability and the lives of people, they all interconnect with me. And it's something I'm passionate about. And I just find people fascinating. And I want to know what it's like for people in the past, what did they experience. So yeah, I'm pretty keen on all that.
It's so nice to do something which has not just has an audience, but has the audience at heart, and kind of give back in that way. You've mentioned a lot about your reenacting and getting into the 17th century character, or not character as the case may be, your own 17th century self. What is I was going to say the funniest, but the best would do. What is the best story you've gathered over those few years that you've been doing it?
Does it have to be like the story from the past, or just a story from me doing my reenacting, my volunteering?
Well, I meant from you. So yeah, if it interacts with history, great. But yeah.
I think one of my favourites was just my own surprise. So I've been volunteering at Boscwell for a long time. I can't get there at the moment, but God knows I miss it, and they hopefully know how much I'm missing being there with them and getting to do that. But I told you, I think, about one of the things I like to do if we've got the time and the spaces, is to get them, especially family groups, because the kids like to really look for things. It's like real life, where's Wally, where's Charles, get them to find it. And I love seeing how then when I ask them, are you going to would you hand him in for the reward money, or would you help him hide and make his escape? And then usually you get a direct answer with, I'll hide him, I'll hand him in, and then I tell them about what the reward would have been, and the risks for hiding him, and what happened to some people, if they were thought to be helping him and stuff. So it's usually a great way to sort of help them engage with the story and learn a bit. But the one day it really surprised me, because there was this larger family, and straight away they were coming out with their answers. Like one little boy is like, I just handed him in and had the money, and the dad was like one thing in the moment of it. Straight away they looked at each other, and then I get to this girl, and she went, and I could tell she was really thinking about it, and then all of a sudden she says, I think I'd have run away. And I was like, what you mean? Do you mean like run away with him? She says, no, I think I'd have run away. I'd have run away from him. I wouldn't have wanted the money, because if he survives, he's going to come back and punish me for that. She says, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near the soldiers looking for him, because I wouldn't feel safe. She says, I think I just want to get the hell away from there as fast as I could. And I think that's like what I said about the time travel. I would love the Wars of Roses, but I don't think I'd want to be there. And I get what she's saying, and it was the best answer, and it just made my day. Yeah. One of my favourite memories.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share those answers. And I'm sure that everyone who's watching this will be really intrigued and eager to read The Lacemaker's Son now. Yes, and best of luck with everything that's coming together, with the artwork and with the writing as well. So thank you very much, Melissa.
Thank you. It's been great. I've really loved conversing with you about it.